Our next speaker is a business strategist, a best-selling author, and leading authority in customer value and experience management. As president of Janet LeBlanc and Associates, she coaches senior leaders on using client-centric strategies to drive performance. Here to deliver a talk entitled Emotions, the Hidden Driver of SAM's Success. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Janet LeBlanc.
Thank you. So how many of you have watched the Netflix series House of Cards? Great series. The two main characters are devoted and dedicated to maintaining their position and power in the White House. They will do anything. They'll stomp on, step over, and literally eliminate people to ensure that they maintain their position as President and First Lady. What makes the series so engaging is the lack of emotion or empathy that they show throughout this series. Now, most of us don't experience people with no emotion or empathy. In fact, we're all born with some degree of empathy. Newborn babies, only a few days old, will cry at the sound of another baby crying. Those of us who are born without any degree of empathy are called psychopaths. Seriously. They are defects in society because they are completely immune to the feelings of others and won't do anything to undermine their own self-interest. There is a revolution in the science of emotion taking place. There's more research that has been conducted in the area of emotion in the last 10 years than in the last 50 years. Fundamentally, we now know that emotions have a significant impact on decision-making, judgment, and choice. Emotions are a primary driver of decision-making over rational thinking. What we need to be able to do is to understand how to use emotions to become better business leaders, better team players, and better collaborators. Those individuals who are able to understand emotional information and emotional cues can navigate a social environment and business environment more effectively. For some of you today, using emotional information in your strategic account planning might be a paradigm shift. I became interested in emotions when I started my consulting practice in customer experience management about 10 years ago. I was walking into a client office and she was just hanging up the phone with her insurance company. She'd lost her wedding rings at the gym and she was making a claim. And she said, "Janet, I've paid premiums for 20 years. I've never made a claim, and they're making me feel like a criminal." That feeling will stay with her for years to come. When we examine customer experience, it is understanding the intensity of emotions that are created at specific moments in time, moments of truth, defining moments. And as a customer experience practitioner and consultant, we need to be able to examine that end-to-end customer experience and understand the impact of emotions across that journey. In order to use emotional cues effectively, you must be able to discriminate between feelings and label them appropriately. A friend of mine is a child psychologist, and I asked her her best advice for raising my son when he was young. And she handed me a book, The ABCs of Feelings. Each feeling was colorfully illustrated in this book, from anxious to boredom to confusion, allowing my young son to be able to discriminate his own feelings and to build his emotional vocabulary. There are 6 universally recognized emotions, regardless of language or culture. They are happiness, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. Even the mind of a dog will experience these 6 emotions equivalent to that of a 2- or 3-year-old child. So for all the dog owners in the audience here, when you come home late at night and your couch is ripped to shreds, you know for sure that your dog was angry with you. Daniel Goldman's emotional intelligence bestseller identifies the ability to empathize as one of the 5 components of emotional intelligence. People who have a higher degree of emotional intelligence are said to be able to navigate emotional information and use it effectively to get better results. They are said to have better leadership skills. They are said to have better overall job performance and better overall mental health. My sister has twins, boy and a girl, and like all young kids, they fight. And we were all gathered for a Thanksgiving weekend, and the boy, William, stormed off into his room and wouldn't come out. So his mother knocked on the door and said, "William, come on out. Your sister didn't mean it." Wouldn't come out. His father knocked on the door and said, "William, come on out. We're all waiting. You know, your sister didn't mean it. She won't do it again." Again, no go. I knocked on the door and I said, "William, you must be very angry." Sure enough, the door opened. At that moment, he realized that someone acknowledged his feelings, and that gave him permission to open up. In order to use feelings and emotions effectively, you must be able to detect emotions in faces, pictures, and voices. Google's People Analytics division recently did a study to understand some of the factors in team success. And what they found was that those who were able to assess facial expressions had stronger team performance. And those teams that had more women within their team had stronger team performance because women tend to have a higher degree of social perceptiveness. There are cultural differences in terms of how different cultures express emotions. In a North American culture, we've been trained to really keep emotions out of the boardroom, to look at strategy, tactics, leverage when we're making a deal. But that's not the same in all cultures. Some cultures like Mexico, Brazil, Russia, Italy, they're very emotionally expressive. It is part of who they are. Asian cultures, or some cultures, require an emotional connection to be established before a deal is made. And that emotional connection is really based on trust. 2 elements of trust. I trust that you are going to deliver as you promise. You're going to be reliable and credible, and you're going to keep the promises that you make. And trust based on that emotional trust, friendliness, the emotional connection that I make with you, both of those components must exist in order for that emotional connection to be made. How one feels has a greater impact on decision-making than rational thinking. Apple recently bought a company, Emotionnt, makers of artificial intelligence software that analyzes a consumer's emotional state as they're interacting with their products, branding, and messages. Apple recognizes more than anyone the impact of emotions and how they influence behavior. They realize they are able to capture the heart and minds of consumers. They realize that the iPhone is not simply a mobile device. It's actually a sharing experience. Did you know that there are more pictures taken with iPhones than any other camera in the world? The essence of product design is empathy. When you bring teams together to co-create, to innovate, you must be able to empathize and understand the needs and expectations of those clients that you are trying to serve. Harley-Davidson recognizes the impact of emotions on how people make decisions. They use branding very effectively in order to influence behavior. Branding essentially is the expectation of an experience multiplied by the emotional connection of that experience. Branding is a marketer's most advanced emotional tool. Until 20 years ago, research paid very little attention to the impact of emotions on decision making. Today, researchers know that 95% of our mental activity is subconscious. Our emotional brain sends 10 times as much information to our brain for processing versus rational information. We feel before we think, and we buy emotionally. I know that buying a minivan would be much more practical, but I can guarantee you that buying a sports car is definitely an emotional buy. So why does this matter for you? Why does this matter for you as a strategic account manager, as a business leader, as a collaborator? Simply, emotions make people evaluate a situation differently. People who are in good moods make optimistic decisions. People who are in bad moods make pessimistic decisions. Those of us who are anxious during a negotiation will make a financial deal that's less financially favorable. And you will also be not as capable of distinguishing between good and bad advice. For those who think that using anger during a negotiation will be helpful, not true. Anger breaks the trust and breaks the emotional bond and connection that you've established with someone as you're working together. We must be able to examine how emotions change throughout a course of a relationship. At the beginning of a relationship, people are very excited and happy, and they feel the sense of thrill of something new. In the beginning of a relationship, they can be angry, concerned, or worried. In the aftermath, they may be disappointed, sad, show regret, or relief. So you need to be able to examine those emotional connections and relationships throughout that relationship. Harvard Business School teaches their students the impact of emotions on workforce behaviors. Their MBA students are all given a simulation, a role play, to role play going through a negotiation. Secretly, one side is told to be very angry. What they're teaching students to do is to, one, recognize their own emotions through the course of a negotiation, teaching that ability to critically self-reflect on their emotions as they are interacting with someone who is very angry as well. Not only do we look at emotions across the course of a relationship, but we should strategically examine and plan for emotional connections and recognize the difference at various levels of the organization. So researchers have found that as power and authority increases, it tends to go to our head and forgets about our heart. So it's a fact that people in powerful positions have a decreased ability to empathize and understand the feelings of others. How many of you have had a boss like that, right? In The Art of War, Sun Tzu wrote, "Every battle is won or lost before it is ever fought." We need to be able to plan for emotional connections. Try to make an emotional connection as quickly as possible as you're starting a relationship. Watch for emotional cues and adjust your actions accordingly. Invest in developing an emotional map. You probably invest in doing an influence map, a stakeholder map. Think about that emotional map and how you can use the emotional cues to strengthen the relationships that you have, to strengthen the collaboration, negotiation, and build stronger bonds. Tune into emotional cues. So train yourself to look for facial expressions in voices and pictures, those emotional cues that you're looking for. And don't be afraid to ask people, "You seem very uneasy. Can you tell me, share with me, help me to understand why you seem uneasy," to help to understand the emotional relationship that people are going through. Maya Angelou, the poet and author, said it best: "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Thank you.
Thank you very much.